Запись. Итак, добро пожаловать еще раз. Спасибо, что вы вернулись на нашу презентацию, посвященную серии книг Routledge Russian Language Pedagogy and Research Series. Our first presenter today is Dr. Svetlana Nuss, who is the founder of the series. And she will introduce the series concept and we will take it from there. After Svetlana, we will hear from Olesya Kisselev, then Jason Merrill, then Dmitrii Pastushenkov, and I will wrap up and then turn it back to Svetlana, who will tell us about future opportunities with the series. So warm welcome to Svetlana. And I will advance the slides. Okay.
Thank you so much. The series was established in 2021, and we started out with the first volume publishing in 2022, which was task-based instruction of teaching Russian as a foreign language. We now have 8 volumes out and growing by the day. We have 3 more under contract and more plans in the future. And I invite new calls for proposals all the time. It's where we're accepting them on a rolling basis. When we established the series, Mash, do next one, please. When we established the series, and next one, please. We looked at several important qualities for the series to embody. First of all, we have open and transparent calls for submissions, for editors, for reviewers, for volumes and monographs. And like I said, they are on ongoing basis. We accept new proposals all the time. So please get in touch with me. I'm easy to get in touch with. I have my contact information at the end. The series are very attentive to rigor, to academic scholarship. So every chapter that we publish is usually peer-reviewed by 2 or 3 reviewers. Every chapter that we publish has lessons learned, and that's in addition to theory that usually is reflected in chapters. We ask the authors to reflect on their lessons learned. Even when the chapter is all research and all theory, we still ask you for lessons. There's got to be something that you learned when you were working on this chapter. So be it theoretical experience as a researcher, as a writer, as a teacher, maybe some tips that you can give to other teachers who are trying to implement your case study, if that's what it was, your chapter was about. We want to hear about it. The main difference between the series and the academic journals is that the series are shaped by series editors. The edited volume that we put out is shaped by the series editors. So that means that we have to adhere to very strict submission deadline. However, I will tell you, if you're submitting a chapter, if you're watching this recording, maybe after this our session, because I see many experienced authors already in our audience today. However, if you're submitting your chapter after the deadline, always check with your co-editors. It sometimes happens that we have to issue a second call for proposals. So we may open the Google Doc, Google form, where we usually collect proposals, open for a few more days, or maybe we will open it again for you if your proposal sounds amazing and we want to publish it in this specific volume. The thing is, they are themed, for example, student-centered teaching, or task-based instruction, or content-based learning, or STEM instruction, STEM-based teaching. So if you're not if your chapter doesn't make it into this particular volume, you're going to have to wait for second edition of that volume or publish somewhere else. So that's why we do our absolute best to include chapters, even if you're late submitting it. I'm not encouraging you to be late, but sometimes maybe you didn't hear on time about it. So another feature that makes us different from journals is we do not provide the feedback that we get from our reviewers straight to the author. At least that's the idea. Why? We look at the chapter that we have submitted. We look at as editors, we sit down, we look at the chapter that we have submitted. We look at the 3 reviews that we have, and then based on those reviews, we put together our combined feedback based on those reviews, based on the chapter, based on the vision for the volume, and based on, of course, on the reviewer's suggestions. We will give authors a direction. We're not going to give every comment to you. Sometimes that just puts you in the position where you have to choose between this reviewer's comment and that reviewer's comment. You need to make a decision as an author. And anybody who submitted their publications for academic journals understands the dilemma. So we're trying to take as much patchwork and guesswork out of your decision and trying to shape the volume, take the responsibilities on it as editors, and help our authors. You are always encouraged to give us feedback and talk to your editors, and maybe insist on some of your ideas. Another feature that we have is we offer to our readership abstracts that are in 2 languages. We publish them in Russian and in English. So in Russian we call it краткое содержание главы, and in English it's called usually chapter summary. It's reader friendly. It's increasing our readership because the abstracts are available for free. As you know, the series is behind paywall. There's nothing we can do about this at this time, at least. But at least abstracts are available. And that concludes my introduction. I included a little more information in the next few slides, Masha, but you can skip it. It's just to be audience friendly and just give people a little more information about our series. I will say we make a lot of effort to publish our calls for proposals, to make sure that every volume is international. With some volumes, it happens. With other volumes, it happens to a lesser degree. But I say the champion so far is our heritage volume that collected so much participation from around the world, and the editor's effort was amazing. Our team for of authors came together, star team of authors, and I am so delighted to worked with Olesya and her team. And Masha, will you be introducing them next?
Yes, my pleasure. So it's thank you very much, Svetlana, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Olesya Kisselev, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at the University of South Carolina. Her primary research expertise lies in the area of corpus linguistics and discourse analysis, especially as they apply to the study of various aspects of bilingualism and multilingualism and diasporic language practices, as well as second and heritage language development and maintenance. Her scholarly contributions include research papers and book chapters, as well as edited volumes on linguistic aspects of heritage languages. So, Olesya, warm welcome, and please let me know if you would like to share. Yeah, I can stop sharing this then. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure that I didn't send you the slides yet. And
Oh, you can share from your device.
Yeah.
All right. So welcome,
Yeah.
Olesya.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for this generous introduction. And Svetlana, you stole that bridge from me because I did want to use it as a transition into our incredibly international team of authors. I also wanted to point out that the absolute majority of our many authors of the chapters in this book are women. So this is, I think, a very special sort of accomplishment for us. And 2 men who are co-authors on 2 papers are dissertation, what is it called? Dissertation advisors. So in many ways, I feel like these were just nominal authors, and all the rest of the paper is this is a sort of a hugely feminist volume, as it were. Including the team of the editors, I certainly didn't do it on my own, so I was greatly helped by two of my co-editors, Oksana Laleko of SUNY New Paltz. She's pictured here on the left, on my left at least, and Dr. Irina Dubinina of Brandeis University. The impetus of this volume came from our attempts to understand where heritage language education as a field stands right now. And, the volume is young enough to sort of still use the present tense. I certainly think that we'll be moving towards a new edition of this book very soon, with all the changes happening in the Russian-speaking diaspora and in heritage language education. But we wanted to sort of to take this opportunity to really bring together multiple views on the place of heritage language education in the larger field of language education, as well as in the larger field of heritage language studies, because a lot of our authors are really more linguists and scholars of heritage languages rather than pedagogues. And so we wanted to incorporate all these disparate and distinct perspectives on heritage language education, spanning critical language pedagogy, language ideologies, translanguage and multiliteracies, linguistic perspectives, structural perspectives, and of course, pedagogical perspectives. Another important aspect of working on this book for us was the active dialogue between linguistics, SLA, and pedagogy. The three of us kind of bring these perspectives into the book as well, with Oksana being a trained linguist and a scholar of linguistics and heritage linguistics, including Irina and I both trained as SLA specialists and working actively in the second and heritage language classrooms. We wanted to sort of integrate these perspectives and have these perspectives shine through every chapter of the book that we presented. So this is really a key point that we wanted to highlight. Another very important idea about heritage language education that we wanted to put forth through this volume is this idea of the importance of differentiation in heritage language instruction. For years and years, we've been talking in the field about kind of unified heritage language pedagogy. And through the work, through sort of thinking about this book and putting this book together, we really wanted to emphasize the idea that every language, and I would even say further that every language dyad exists in such specific sociocultural and linguistic environment that we really need to think about kind of heritage language approach to Russian English bilingualism in the United States, or Russian Spanish bilingualism in Spain, or Russian Israeli bilingualism in Israel, that sort of a thing. And this is where, we wanted to make sure that we show that perspective, that geographic spread, and through that we show that different dyads have very specific characteristics, opportunities, obstacles, and that heritage language, Russian heritage pedagogy will look very different for these different geographic areas, sociocultural areas. And then, of course, we still want to see enough common patterns so that we can learn from one another and highlight these lessons learned, as Svetlana pointed out. So this is sort of a graphic representation of this idea that in this dialogue between linguistic scholarship, sociolinguistic scholarship, and classroom practices, we can identify these points where our heritage language, Russian heritage language dyads are unique and where they share some things in common. So all in all, we have 12 chapters represented in the edited volume. It is not only representing a wide geographic spread, it also covers all areas of language, of linguistic aspects and linguistic structures, from phonetics and phonology to morphosyntax to pragmatics to writing and reading, sociolinguistics and educational practices. It is aligned with these kind of groups of factors that we suggest should influence HL instruction that I highlighted on the previous slide, or also repeated here, kind of the linguistic features of HL, the literacy and text-based practices, as well as community-based and sociocultural and socio-demographic factors. So we sort of split this book into these, or aligned our chapters along these three areas, with part one addressing mostly the linguistic perspective, showing or featuring such work as linguistic knowledge and proficiency assessment. And a lot of that work had to do with lexical knowledge as well as pragmatic knowledge based in realized as word order pragmatics, phonetics, forms of address, which is the area of pragmatics, and another chapter on pragmatics of requests. The second part focused on literacy development with a number of papers on the development of writing and register variation and reading abilities of heritage learners of Russian. And part number 3 dealt with many aspects of socio prefix of our kind of academic world, sociocultural, socio-demographic, sociolinguistic perspectives. And this is where it was specifically really, really important for us to tap into different geographic regions and different kind of environments in which Russian heritage bilingualism flourishes. So another important thing here, of course, that absolutely every paper had to have a very strong implication for Russian heritage language instruction section. And we really tried to include very specific practical advice and pedagogical considerations. So I encourage everyone to, even if you don't have the time to read through the research part of the papers, really look into the implications sections, because we did our best to provide solid pedagogical advice based on the research that we saw. This is it. Thank you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions should we have any.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olesya. So I believe we decided to go through all presentations first, so our guests have a sense of the series as it has developed. So I will share the slide deck back and introduce our next co-editor. So I would like to extend a warm welcome to Jason Merrill, who is Professor of Russian and Associate Director of the Center for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies at Michigan State University. He is former director of the Middlebury College Catherine Wasserman Davis School of Russian. Dr. Merrill is co-editor of The Art of Teaching Russian 2020 and co-author of Russian Folk Tales, a reader for students of Russian, published in 2000 with a second edition in 2016. He's also a co-editor of Animation for Russian Conversation. So warm welcome to Jason.
Thank you very much. And today I will be, excuse me, talking about the volume that edited together with, as you can see from the title here, Svetlana and Olga Makarova. It's going to be coming out any day now. They are telling us May 19th, but Routledge has been very, very prompt, if not early with previous deadlines. So I wouldn't be surprised if it came out a little earlier than that. So as you see here, the title is Content-Based Teaching of Russian as a Foreign Language. And the concept of the book, there are 13 articles total. First, there's we have a framework here where and I didn't list the pieces of the framework, my apologies here in the slides, but they're, we, the editors, give an introduction, which is sort of an introduction to the ideas behind the book, a literature review, and then at the end we provide a conclusion as well, part of which includes possible future directions for content-based learning and content-based teaching of Russian. And Maria as well, her article, I'm going to include it as part of the framework here, where she presents in great detail the results of a 2023 survey. Her article is called Themes, Trends, and Opportunities in the Content-Based Teaching of Russian, and really goes through all sorts of aspects in the questions that were asked to teachers who use content-based teaching approaches in their teaching of Russian. How are they teaching? What are they teaching? Texts, student responses, all sorts of wonderful stuff like that gives a really great sort of sense of the field right now. And then after that, we get into the framework, the core of the book. The contributions, that is the 10 that you're going to see listed here and on the next slide, all focus on aspects of content-based language instruction with content, as you can imagine, I think, understood widely and really on it with an emphasis on content that hopefully will still be relevant in the future. Hopefully we'll still be reading these articles in 5, 10, 20 years. But of course, one of the things we talk about in our conclusion is this whole notion of, what kind of content will we even be talking about 10, 15 years from now? So that's a hope kind of tempered with the knowledge that, of course, this idea of content changes all the time. There are a few, as you will see from the list, there are a few more theoretical articles, but even they, as Svetlana emphasized in her introduction, really emphasize the hands-on. That is, things that readers can turn around, replicate, copy, take pieces from in their own classrooms, on their own campus, or even in their own community, depending on which of the contributions you happen to be looking at. And as Svetlana mentioned as well, each article has the lessons learned section, which was, of course, is super, super important here, where the author reports how, say, the experiment, the lesson, the unit went, and things to keep in mind for next time. That is, lessons learned by the author that the author is passing on to the readers. So we decided to organize the case studies, the articles, case studies, by targeted proficiency level, and we ended up with 2 sections. Therefore, in the first one, we called from beginner to intermediate, and you see all of the titles here. And Maria, can I have the next slide, please? And the next part, building off of that, is from intermediate to advanced. It has the 6 remaining case studies here. So we were happy that these sections came out somewhat balanced there. 4 and 6 are pretty close to balance there. And just want to share a couple of key findings. I guess Mary, the next slide just has the word key findings on it, but a couple of key findings, key things, sort of takeaways from our collection. Just in general, I think it's really important to have collections like this regarding Russian in particular. But hopefully these are ideas that will be useful for teachers of other languages as well. I always, in work like this, always hope for cross-language pollination, and hopefully teachers of other languages are reading our work, I guess, the same way we read theirs. As I mentioned, we were happy to have 4 contributions focused on the beginner to intermediate stage, and some of them are really working with true beginners in there. Because of course, content-based practice, content-based research typically works more at higher levels. The idea being the more content that students have, the more there is to work with there. But we have, I think, 4 pretty solid contributions that really focus on maybe first year, third semester, somewhere in their classes. Several of our articles take students outside the classroom to places like the Campus Art Museum. You might not be able to replicate some of them exactly, say like Victoria Hasko's, she writes about a weekend retreat that was done at the University of Georgia. But they're all good food for thought to encourage readers to look at their own local resources and think, well, if I can't do exactly that, what could I pull from this, and what sort of resources do I have around there? Lots of ways to be thinking more widely about, again, local resources and programming, perhaps even involvement in the community. Several of our contributions look at media, and this is an important skill, of course, in any language, being able to negotiate various types of media. They look at a range of media. Lyudmila Klimanova's article looks at a much older form of media. I hate to say that, but print books. But it's really a project in which students work together from scratch to actually create a book about the local Russian-speaking community there. 2 of the contributions look at teaching intercultural communication and competence as a separate skill. These articles, of course, use content as a subject matter, but are looking more widely at this whole idea of intercultural competence and teaching it again as a discrete subject. 2 of our articles detail work done in the context of the Russian language flagship program, which is sort of important collaborations there. And just as on a final note, our literature review shows that content-based instruction has been around a long time and probably will last a lot more. And its longevity is due in part to exactly this flexibility that we've talked about, the ease with which this notion can be applied to new forms of content, that this notion is very adaptable to the changing nature of content. As we said, the kind of content we'll be talking about in 20 years probably doesn't even exist anymore, but I think the flexibility to work with it is there. And I think our authors have touched on a lot of that there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jason, and I'm sure we will get into more discussions. So colleagues, please hold your questions until we're done presenting all volumes. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker and co-editor, Dr. Dmitrii Pastushenkov, who is preceptor in the Russian language program in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at Harvard University. He's an applied linguist and holds a PhD in second language studies from Michigan State University. Dmitrii's primary research area is instructed second language acquisition, focusing on how languages are taught and learned in educational settings and how research can inform classroom practice. Dmitrii has also studied the language of propaganda and contemporary Russian literature. His work has appeared in Language Learning and Technology, the Modern Language Journal, Applied Linguistics, Russian Language Journal, TESOL Journal, and several Routledge volumes. And he is a co-editor of the next volume we will hear about. Welcome, Dmitrii.
Thank you very much, Masha. I think I can share my screen. So I have to ask you to switch between the slides. Okay. Thank you very much for organizing this panel today, and I would like to talk about the volume that I'm co-editing with my colleague from Harvard, Dr. Liya Zalaldinova. So why are we doing this? as you know, one of the first questions that we get as teachers is how many homework assignments there will there be any tests, how they will be graded, stuff like that. So assessment is something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. We often hear assertions like, I'm an assessment person, right? So it's a researcher who specializes in assessment. And many of us were international students who had to take standardized tests like TOEFL or IELTS, for example. But unfortunately, our experiences with assessment, either as test takers or test administrators, have not always been positive. So this is why we're doing this volume, and it is guided by the idea of the connection, of the link between research and teaching practice. So we divide the volume into several sections, documenting assessment, linguistic analysis, social justice, rethinking Russian language assessment, and emerging Russian language assessment trends. I just want to talk briefly about some of the things that you can expect from the volume. So one of the emerging themes of the volume is, of course, the need to shift the focus towards students. So our contributors, our wonderful authors, they argue that we need to move from the traditional teacher-centered models of assessment to more learner-centered methods of assessment. It could be done even in, for example, generative AI classrooms where we use generative AI. For example, Kit Pribble talks about things like AI peer review, which is very interesting that I want to try out also in my classes. My colleague from Harvard, my co-editor, Liya Zalaldinova, and our graduate student, Anna Ivanov, talk about time capsule interviews. This is something that they're doing at the advanced level. This is a type of so-called ipsative assessment in which students measure their progress against their own results in the past, which is particularly important at the advanced level. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the ACTFL scale, with the pyramid. And when we move from, for example, beginner low to beginner high, we can track progress easily. We can see the results. But at the advanced level, it becomes a little bit more difficult, and sometimes our students feel a little bit, stagnation. This idea of stagnation comes into play, right? And time capsule that Leah and Anna have developed at the advanced level, they work great. So students record, for example, in our advanced classes, they record themselves in the beginning of a semester, then again at the end, and they can track their progress, which is, again, type of learner-centered ipsative assessment. So we were very lucky to have 3 chapters from experienced instructors and administrators from Russian flagship programs. And one of the, for me, it was also a learning experience. And this is one of the things that I learned about flagship. What they're doing is that they introduce ACTFL proficiency guidelines and ILR skill descriptors very early. And they align their curricula with proficiency goals. And the results are fascinating. So by the end of the flagship program, 86% of their participants, their students, they reach ILR3 in speaking proficiency, which is general professional proficiency, which is a great result, especially previous research has showed that studies that they showed that widespread inability to achieve advanced proficiency before graduation. So we have 3 chapters about flagship in our volume. Olesya Kisselev and her colleagues discuss advances in linguistic analysis, automated language assessment, which could be like a topic for another presentation, but they discuss tools like Visualizing Russian developed by our very own Stephen Clancy. They talk about SMART tool, lexical minimum for Russian as a foreign language, keywords for language learning. So automated language assessment is an important direction outlined by our authors. In terms of linguistic analysis, Anderson and Zhukova discussed that we should, as a field, move in assessment, move from isolated vocabulary grammar to construction. So they discussed their constructionist approach to assessment and teaching as well, by the way. and that instead of isolated vocabulary and grammar, we should learn construction. So, and you can, and they argue, level one, in first year Russian, these are the constructions that you can use. So construction, they include a fixed component and something that changes. And I think this is an excellent way to kind of merge vocabulary and grammar, or you can call it lexicography, and how it can shape our, assessment and teaching practices. Например, по профессии он программист, right? So this would be a construction. In terms of technology, Pavlenka talks about the Kahoot course that she developed to complement her chapter. As of today, the Kahoot course that Olesya developed includes right now 40,000 players worldwide, which is very nice, actually, considering that Russian is a less commonly taught language. And she talks about her approach. She refers to it as a tech-savvy assessment approach that combines, for example, Kahoot with other apps, for example, Duolingo. And you can check out the course using this QR code there. I think we're going to share it with our participants at some point. So I learned, for me, it was also a learning experience, which is, I think, very important. So I learned about feminist assessment from Vyatachitnev's chapter, and how, for example, TOEFL framework or things like formative, peer, and self-assessment align with the principle of feminist assessment a little bit better. I also want to point out that this chapter is an ethnography, which is, I think, is a promising direction for our field. It's an interesting qualitative longitudinal methodology. Evgeny Dengub, I'm sure you have heard about him talking about ungrading. So this is a big thing for Zhenya, of course, but he talks a little bit more about this practice, drawing on a survey that he conducted with his students. And one of the things of course, is that one of the findings is that Evgeny argues that ungrading is great, right? But students still need a lot of feedback. Because for many of them, if they see an A, right, it means that this is their feedback, but they need something more than that. And then great. And I want to finish my part of the presentation. I hope I'm not a little over time, but and I think Emil, I saw you in the audience earlier, but hope you're here still. So Emil Asanov, in his chapter called cheating the system, I think this chapter illustrates one of the themes of our volume, that we need to oppose traditionalism that dominates our classrooms. And he talks about positive psychology, and an important direction in SLA and psychology, obviously, and that we can bring some ideas to make assessment less stressful for them. And one of them is to use so-called authorized cheat sheets. And you can see a couple of examples of authorized cheat sheets here. And yeah. And these are the things that can change maybe our assessment practices, and we're very lucky to have such a great team of authors. Thank you very much.
Dmitrii, thank you so much for your presentation and for the volume. We very much look forward to its publication. So I will continue with our next volume, which is called Teaching Russian Through STEM, Contexts, Tools, and Approaches. And you've already heard Jason's compelling presentation about content-based teaching of Russian. So this volume kind of directly grew from that project. Svetlana and I initially solicited a call for papers for content-based teaching of Russian. It grew exponentially. So Jason and Olga joined Svetlana to work on content-based teaching of Russian, whereas I took over the subset devoted to teaching Russian through STEM. So I will give you a quick outline, and I hope we have more time for conversation later. So the concept of this volume was to hone in on the classes, materials, and approaches of teaching content-based courses centered around STEM topics. We wanted to take a long look back, because teaching Russian through STEM has been around, believe it or not, through early 20th century in different contexts. And we also wanted to look at various practices of teaching Russian through STEM now, following Svetlana's lead in trying to attract international audience of participants. We really try to offer international contexts where we could. As a result, our contributors indeed were from Japan, 2 publications from Russia, 1 publication from Czech Republic, Czechia, excuse me, and the rest of the publications by scholars and instructors from the United States. In terms of approaches, it was quite a big range. So the chapters, the subparts of the book, in the subparts of the book, we tried to build it logically. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges as editors, how to structure the submissions you receive into logical components. So we tried to look at existing models of teaching, approaches to courses and program design, but also approaches to assessment and development of materials. We were lucky to get the contributions that addressed a range of educational contexts, including secondary school and heritage and bilingual education, an article on vocational school training and materials, and I would say more of the chapters devoted to post-secondary courses on Russian for STEM in Russia and in the United States. So part 1 of the volume begins with a historical overview that Svetlana and I put together in chapter 1, and chapters 2, 3, and 4 present case studies of thematic units or entire courses devoted to STEM topics and currently taught in the US educational landscape. Molly Blazin's article talks about intermediate to intermediate high level instruction. Irina Ivleeva's contribution addresses various level of instruction. Chapter 4 that I co-authored with Svetlana Abramova and Veronika Yegorova gives a model of course and a sample module overview for advanced level teaching of Russian through STEM. And then the next part of the book is quite interesting because it turns to a StarTalk program directed to high school learners of Russian that ran for 10 years, for a decade, in the University of Washington, called Russian in the Sky and Outer Space. The authors not only present the program itself, its goals, materials development, but also reflect on approaches to assessing the entire program. And part 6 addresses teaching Russian for students at vocational schools, focusing on construction and development fields. And that was a little bit eye-opening for us as editors to see this new context of teaching Russian language. The authors describe an open access platform they designed, which is called Builders Let's Go, which has thematic lessons, video and grammar lessons on vocabulary necessary for construction fields. And then part 3 turns to corpus-based approaches with 2 chapters by our colleagues at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow, who describe their resources that are currently in development, that are based on corpus studies, and that turn to academic discourse and specifically the language of math and math instruction. And chapter 9 addresses materials for bilingual children that are used in heritage instruction and that incorporate textbooks written for monolingual and bilingual students. The author, Anna Savinych, who also presented yesterday, developed a unique method based on Bloom's taxonomy and a deep analysis on the hierarchy of teaching tasks, which she uses as a lens to assess educational materials. So all in all, our conclusions were that studying Russian and teaching Russian through STEM demands more attention, but also more differentiation. And in her concluding chapter that Svetlana wrote, and I co-authored, but it was mainly her findings, that call for more nuanced and more case-based approach to teaching Russian through STEM, but being cognizant of the context of teaching, whether it is Russian for STEM courses for students who are about to enroll in Russian universities or courses for students who study abroad in US or in other countries. The ratio and the correlation of language and content would be markedly different, as Svetlana summarized in these graphs. And I think echoing what Olesya said, each educational context is unique, and our approach to language and content should be carefully tailored to our student audiences. I will conclude here and pass the baton back to Svetlana. And I would like to emphasize that as a co-editor, it was a wonderful learning curve as well. well to work on the volume together, to work on the contributions, but also on the concept of the series that takes language pedagogy and student-centeredness as one of its key principles. So back to Svetlana. Oh, that's our conclusion. Sorry, that's a long quote from our concluding chapter, where we try to make a strong argument in favor of teaching STEM to help our students become better humans and to advance in their professions that are increasingly more business, economics, and STEM oriented, but still benefit a lot from learning the language and learning humanistic approaches to culture. All right, back to Svetlana.
All right, we're developing the series. Thank you, Masha, so much. Finally, we have a place where people can submit their names, and you will receive announcements about books that are coming out, all the calls that we put out. I know people are asking for newsletter. One day we'll have a newsletter, but for now, at least we have this place where we can collect your information if you'd like to receive future calls calls for proposals, calls for new volumes, calls for reviewers, editors, new invitations of volumes. And I'm super easy to get in touch with. I'm so happy always to hear from new people and from old friends. And Masha, would you move, please, next slide. Our current call for submissions is the Big Book of Tasks for Teaching Russian. This is exclusively case studies. This is exclusively tasks. There will be no theoretical introductions. It's just going to be maybe a couple of pages. Maximum submission volume is about 500 words. We want to be very succinct and very to the point with the specific materials for tasks, so that the teachers can take it, maybe duplicate some in some way, and teach in their classes. So this is super practical resource. And we're opening a second call for submissions, which will be open through the end of May. And this is the link where you can submit your proposals, your chapter proposals. I just posted some information about some links to, first of all, to this Google form that collects the proposals for the Big Book of Tasks for Teaching Russian. Then there is a link to sign up for our future calls for everything, and actually the link to the series itself. Thank you so much for your participation today, and we're open for your questions.
Thank you, Svetlana. Thank you so much. And thank you for being such an energetic and inspiring leader. I think you started a movement, and this movement is growing. So it's really fun to be part of it. I'll stop sharing the slides and let's take questions, comments, reflections. We do have several of contributing authors in the audience as well. So we would love to hear from you.
And maybe if someone would like to share their experience of writing a chapter, we would be all for that.
I just wanted to say, well, I don't know if you can see me. For some reason, it's not recognizing my face. But because I've contributed to 2 volumes in the series, and I just want to thank Svetlana, Olga, Jason, Dima, and Leah for all their guidance that they've provided me individually and also my co-authors, because the chapter that we wrote for the content-based volume was with my former coordinator, Lisa DiBartolomeo, and my colleague at the Art Museum at West Virginia University. So it was a great experience, and I think this is an amazing series, and I just want to thank the editors and, the editor series, Svetlana, for starting this initiative, because I think that's an amazing contribution to the field, but also all the editors of different volumes. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and especially for extending this opportunity to graduate students. I'm very happy that graduate students are welcomed in this space and are invited to contribute their work. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. Yeah. Well, I do have a question actually to Svetlana. Can you tell us, please, a little bit how it started, right? So we know how it's going, where the future is, but what was the first project like, and what enabled it to grow so successfully? So.
I think the idea was in the air that we needed some more outlets for publications. And it started by Routledge approaching me and establishing the series. Really, they were looking for expertise in teacher education. When when we teach, the big idea is that having textbooks is wonderful. Some of them are very expensive. Some of them are free these days, so that's amazing. But also using those textbooks in your classroom and developing your expertise as a professional is super important. And these books provide such amazing, unparalleled professional development opportunities for the teachers all around the globe, teachers of Russian. Thank you, Mash.
I'm not going to unmute myself, but I'm going to say the same things as been already reiterated. Tremendous word of gratitude for Svetlana and Maria and all the editors, because for me, as an experienced writer, I've been doing it for a long time, interaction with editors is tremendously important part of the process. Working with you, I can do it again and again and again, if I only can have the time. In fact, I'm so excited to see the second call for the proposals for the tasks. You inspired me. I'm going to write something up, possibly in the next couple of weeks, and try to submit. Again, it's not about just, my contribution, but the process itself. It's straightforward. Editors are always very responsive, and again, the way you described, you interact and give back the criticism is tremendously important, right? Not to squash the initiative, but again, make it blossom. I appreciate hardest work that you do.
Well, thank you to everyone for participation. I want to say, you keep saying Svetlana, but it's every volume teaches us so much. I think every editor is going to say that we learn so much with every volume. There is not enough, oh, I know everything. Absolutely not. We learn to shape the chapters. We develop the vision, share the vision with the team, and involve new people, new ideas. Yeah, you guys are amazing.
May I ask a question to Olesya? I haven't had the chance to see the volume in full yet. And in your overview, you mentioned that was really a multiplicity of national and international contexts. What was your biggest lesson learned, both kind of theoretically for your research, but it's also practically for teaching? And I'm going to, for the benefit of our audience, I'll put the link to this volume. I believe it has kind of a longer preview option than some of the other books. So
Right, actually it does. It
yeah.
does. And also, the first chapter is also available through Google Books. Svetlana, I don't know, this comes as a surprise. Like I found out about it by chance, basically. So
I love it.
I
The
know
Demi
many of you
available.
have mentioned this, editing as an incredible opportunity to learn about, what our colleagues are doing, but also really learn about this incredibly complex endeavor of editing. So on top of the fact that we did have people from really all across the world, we also had a variety of sort of expertise represented. So some of our authors were just practicing teachers, and some were, hardcore linguists who needed a lot of persuasion and kind of guidance in thinking pedagogically. But they all said that this was a very valuable experience for them to kind of rethink how they think about their research. So the biggest probably challenge was kind of systematizing papers in terms of the genre, because people from other genre cultures or other academic cultures certainly write differently.
And so despite, you know, the provision of guidance and like, you know, these are the requirements for submitting chapters, there was sort of a bit too wide of a variety of kind of genre characteristics. And so we had to be quite heavy-handed in many instances. But because we had really good rapport with our authors, you know, we did work very, very closely with everyone. I think we were able to, so that was that heavy-handed approach to editing, or like a lot of guidance and a lot of kind of dialogic reviewing actually was received really warmly, and most people were very thankful for that kind of very thorough editing work. But it did, you know, this was a lot of sort of back and forth between the three of us, the co-editors, figuring out like what is the like where does the work of an editor stop, right? So to like where do you just stop pushing kind of thing? And this is an interesting challenge to have for sure, right? How much of you should be in every chapter basically. So it's, you know, this was also a negotiation in the team. And perhaps this is something that we could, I don't know, have a little workshop at some point for prospective editors, current and prospective editors, figuring out like how to do this work better, because I'm sure we were all pulling hair at some point in time, right? Or we all had questions that we had no immediate answers to, and we had to bother Jason many, many times because of his prior expertise in editing volumes. Like, how do you go about things like this? Just, yeah. So in the same way that we learn something about writing papers and we ask our colleagues to help us write papers, I think editing is a similar type of work that would really benefit from this sort of collegial brainstorming and learning from one another.
I'm also, Olesya, just spot on. I am so curious to hear your co-editor's advice for future work. What, Jason, maybe something from you, any ideas for us to work more effectively, maybe, or
You mean in terms of exactly what Olesya was talking about there, in terms of the actual kind of nuts and bolts work with authors, and yeah, that's a good question. And I see Olga's here too, so Olga, please feel free to jump in at any time. But I really I like what Olesya was saying about having a workshop for editors. You could almost do that with authors as well. Before everything starts, here are the expectations. Here's the style sheet. This is serious. Please pay attention to this. And I think if editors get together ahead of time and decide, these are our priorities. For example, we're going to say in this series, we're going to emphasize the lessons learned section, then that can be communicated to authors ahead of time and really save a lot of work on the editor's part, perhaps misunderstandings. I almost want to go as far as to say, hurt feelings when there are a lot of corrections sent back, both on a real micro level and a macro level as well. And yeah, perhaps something along those lines. Olga, anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, just talking about plans, I can see that Routledge is putting out, like, churning new books about AI and. So how about AI and teaching Russian or whatever? Yeah. Yeah.
definitely in the works.
Mm. So I'm sure that we already starting using it. So that will be some experience.
There is a proposal out, right? Like, this is where, it's the end of the semester. I may be hallucinating this, but I'm pretty sure that Dima and I are writing a paper for
Right, I missed one then. Okay.
Julia, please go ahead.
I have a question for Olesya. I'm very happy to see kind of a book on this Russian as a heritage language. I teach heritage students and I teach the high school students. So I wonder whether you would recommend this book for the teachers of heritage students at the kind of high school level and maybe lower even for community schools. And my second question for Olesya is about advocacy. Do you have anything there in your book about advocacy, kind of a more interest for heritage students? Because my heritage students very often get horrible treatment in universities when they get there. At least at best they get no interest very often, but they are always being told that they can get like a good grade for doing nothing, that type of thing. So I wonder whether you or anybody there pays attention, like discusses how to get engaged universities and being more interested in heritage students. Thank you.
Let me answer your questions in the opposite order. So second question first. Dima was nodding his head. Jason, Dima, and I are part of a project where we are attempting to answer some of these questions, including advocacy work. Well, so here's the full disclosure is that we understand that advocacy work needs to be done, and that there is very, very at the level of college level programs who teach heritage learners or don't do it very successfully. But we don't have a lot of immediate answers. So we definitely identified this as a big gap in our research when we were talking to our teachers and kind of analyzing the results of the survey. We see that this piece is greatly missing. And this is certainly something that we need as a community, as a field, that we need to get together and really figure out and have some kind of strategic plan on how to better advocate for heritage learners on our campuses and perhaps schools as well. So there will be 2 papers coming out, hopefully later this year, where we raise these questions to some extent. But like I said, unfortunately, not a lot of real answers just yet. As for your first question, I think the book is so we really intentionally made it very practitioner oriented. So the majority of the chapters will be absolutely accessible even to those who do not read research all the time. There might be a couple that are like a little too research-y to have some real implications or immediate implications for teaching. But the majority of the papers have very clear, like, first of all, the research is, and prior research as well as current research is summarized very clearly without too much technical jargon, and then really clear implications for teaching. And at least half of the papers are actually based off of either community schools or kind of child heritage learners and not only adult college level heritage learners. So in fact, this would be a fantastic book to maybe workshop through a reading series, like what are they called, like reading clubs, book clubs, right? That sort of setting where you read a chapter every week and kind of talk through and figure out like what it is that you can implement. And I think there are a lot of implementable advice in each chapter so that it can be immediately transported into the classroom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's obvious that I have to order it today.
Please do.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And I appreciate that. And the question of advocacy too. I'm glad that the work is being done in that. And I know what I said, it's different from university to university. It's very, very different.
Absolutely.
because some my students had a very good experience with it. All depends where they go and
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Yeah, but
I mean,
I'm trying to tell them that they can do Russian together with what else they're going to do. Like if they want to be an engineer, it's okay to do to continue with Russian, and how important it is for cybersecurity and things like that.
Right,
You know,
right.
more and more, and they're actually surprised. They say, "Well, are you sure my Russian is going to be needed?" Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yes, and this is, we certainly saw it that even some people who are willing to talk to us would tell us, like, I don't do anything special for heritage learners. If they come to my class and survive, so be it. Very honest like that. But of course, people who we talk to are, a self-selected group of teachers who try really hard and want to do something for heritage learners. But we can also, one of the biggest and sort of disappointments for us is the fact that our institutions, not individual teachers, but institutions, see, or we say they see no value, but really this is an interpretation. They don't do anything to help us do better for our heritage learners. That's sort of a big issue.
Thank you.
Olesya, and I would also say to become better teachers, become better teachers as well. If you compare our tertiary educational systems to K-12, there's just, it's day and night.
Of course.
Support our teachers receive K-12 teachers as teachers in teaching craft. Your talent will take you so far.
No. But we persevere. So speaking of practical lessons, I have a question for Dmitrii. Have you personally gained something that you brought to your classroom working with all the chapters for the assessment volume?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Masha. Well, ipsative assessment is definitely something I want to implement a little bit more. Hopefully next semester I'll be able to do it a little bit more because I was fascinated by this idea of Leah and Anna in their chapter about video-based assessments at the advanced level, and I know that students at the advanced level they're frustrated about their progress, right? Because you cannot just say, you don't move from advanced low to advanced mid or advanced high like this, like you do at the beginner level. So this is something that I really want to do a little bit more. And I do implement the Kahoot course that Olesya developed for her chapter. Yeah, and I was very happy to see that 40,000 players. I was very surprised by the number. I mean, it was a happy surprise, of course, that it has drawn attention of so many players, learners worldwide, and I do implement it in my courses. And again, this Kahoot course is a little bit different from what you're used to. So Olesya is using advanced features with like GIFs, pictures, type the answer option. So explore it if you have some time and yeah, and like Svetlana mentioned, yeah, it was a learning experience for me and Leah. So we learned so much from our authors. And I want to explore, for example, generative AI and this idea of AI peer review. I've never even thought about this. AI peer review. So AI acting as your peer for your writing assessment and how it can be integrated. And in her chapter, Kit Pribble, she added her lesson plans basically. So we have a big appendix for the chapter, and you can just take it and use it in your classes. This is something I want to explore a little bit more. But every chapter was the learning experience. I've never heard about feminist assessment, for example, and now I understand. I want to make assessment more equitable, more inclusive by integrating more peer assessment, self-assessment, ipsative assessment, stuff like that. So yeah, it was a good experience, and I tried to learn from it as well and integrate it more in my classes. Thank you for your question, Masha.
My pleasure. And then going back to Jason, and I think Olga already disconnected. What about your experience of editing the content-based volume? Because there's such a range of contributions there as well. Like, was there something you were willing or curious to take away from it to your teaching or review? Yeah.
Oh, from the actual teach, so the actual teaching part, then essentially the same question to Dima then. Um, yeah, unfortunately, I only teach one language class a semester now, but it's pretty content based, and I think what I am taking away is more sort of little things here and there, like little pieces that I find in some of these articles, not necessarily like the main point of the article, but I tend to find also inspiration in little details here and there, and I can't think of any examples right now, but I know I did this last fall with a couple of the articles. I remember reading them and thinking, aha, I'm going to, and it was more little, I think, subtle adjustments that I made and things that I was doing. And I have to admit, since Dima was just talking as well from Dima's presentation, that I've been using, I guess, what is now called authorized cheat sheets for years and years in my classes, and I absolutely love it. I've done this for a very, very long time. I never even thought of sort of writing it up or researching it because for me, it always solves two problems. The students think they're getting a real good deal, like, oh boy, we get to use a cheat sheet, when in fact, we know that a lot of the learning and retention comes from the actual, and you do, Emil, are they all on the nice small cards like that? I love to give them almost an impossibly small space to see the very creative ways in which they do this, but I think the retention comes from that, and of course they lower the stress so much. But you probably write all about that in the article, and I can't wait to see it.
Yay, stay tuned.
How many of you remember these cheat sheets? I don't know if you guys ever used it. Those of us who were learning in Russia, something like this, and you write on the front and on the back, and you just conveniently use it like this, and you flip through it. So that hopefully your teacher doesn't see it, and then you prepare it and then never use it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jason. I think overall the series did have a strong culture of communication between editors and contributors, and I think we all hit some roadblocks editing the writing from, as Olesya put it, different scholarly tradition, different academic traditions. We did always try to emphasize and ask our colleagues from other countries to have a native speaker proofread their work, but that still went with a various degree of success. So I just wonder if almost like plan referat should be like have an introduction, have this. Like I don't, but I don't know to what extent it's okay to micromanage or not, right? So probably not. I think the guidelines are very helpful. Maybe revisiting them and revising them based on our editorial experience was good.
Well, I would certainly like to thank you, Masha, for organizing this panel and for keeping the conversation alive and going, and for your wonderful questions, but for the efforts and the energy that you invested into this session and all of your other work. Thank you so much. You have done. We appreciate so much every one of your efforts. Maybe I don't write you an email for everything that I see you do, but please know that everything is super appreciated, and that goes to everyone who participated today in the session.
Thank you, Svetlana. Do keep us posted about the new volumes. We'll keep an eye on announcements. Yeah, I think maybe should we repost the links you shared earlier?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from the session today is that people want even more collaboration. I'm thinking, oh, people are so busy, and the editors are so busy, and the writers are so busy. But in the end, it really does save time, and maybe that would be a big adjustment for us.
So colleagues,
moving
if you
forward.
did not
Thank you,
get those
everyone.
links, yeah. I put them in. Thank you all so much for joining this session and the conference overall. Stay tuned, stay around for one more session, and then at 4:30 to 5:30 is a unique moment where we will be speaking with and thanking the co-founders of ACTR. So you have a chance to stay connected with the organization history. I recommend, if you have time, please do join to help us honor these colleagues. So thank you again. I will stop the recording. We can linger a little bit.